Welcome to the Art and Soul Podcast. I'm Alicia, your fellow dreamer and guide on this path of healing. This podcast is our sanctuary, a place where artists, creatives, and sensitive souls like you and me can come to recharge and find inspiration. You'll find tips and tools to help you on your awakening journey. Let's dive deep and discover the magic inside of us. Hello. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I don't know why, but I feel so excited about today's episode, and maybe it's just because I have a lot of exciting things going on in my life, and I'm feeling really pumped about just where Super Bloom Healing is going and where I'm going in my personal life as well. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just feeling so grateful for all of you that come and listen every week to this podcast and that are involved in the membership and that are healing and growing. It's so beautiful to be a part of, and I'm just so honored to be able to help you along the way and guide you through this. So thank you. Thank you for being here. If you've been here for a few weeks, you know that we have been going through the entire energy system in the body, at least the major 7. You know, we are ascending as humans. We are becoming more conscious, and the world overall is becoming more conscious, more aware, and really having a higher voltage overall. As that has happened, we have started to expand our energy centers. So we're actually operating on more than just the main 7 energy centers at this point. But these 7 are kind of the basic energy centers that we're talking about right now, because these are foundational to ascending and expanding your awareness and your consciousness even further. So we have talked about the root, we have talked about the sacral, we have talked about the solar plexus, the heart, and the throat, and today we are talking about the third eye energy center. If you have not listened yet to the other podcast episodes about the energy centers before this one, I definitely recommend going back and just starting with the basics and listening all the way through that way. I think it just provides a better foundation, especially as we are coming into some of these higher dimensional, higher consciousness energy centers. It's going to give you just a little bit of a base to start with before jumping into some of these more metaphysical qualities of our energy. I could say so many things to begin with about this particular energy center. I mean, we are going to talk about a lot of different things today, so I won't really get into too much personal information about this, mainly because I am always talking about spirituality and awakening. And if you haven't yet listened to my podcast on my ego death and my spiritual awakening, that will give you some insight as to what even gives me the right to talk about some of this here, and how I have gone from a more unawakened state to a more awakened state. Now, I don't really love those two categories because I think that we are all in a constant state of expansion. That is the nature of the universe, and we are part of that. So I don't really think there is necessarily a line that you cross over between being unawakened and awakened. I think we're all at just various stages of awakening. But I do think that there is a very clear difference between someone who is living with an activated third eye chakra and someone who is living with an inactive one. So we'll get into all of that as we go. But for me, I definitely had activations happening all throughout my life. I can't really say personally that I feel that I went from a totally closed third eye energy center to a very open one. Some of you will have that experience and that journey, and maybe you already have. But for me personally, I really do believe that there was activity going on in my third eye since I was very young, and it's part of what has led me on this path of helping you all to awaken and to open up your own flow of energy and expansion. So let's just get right into all of this information about the energy center itself. The third eye chakra is located right between the eyebrows, and really the core of it is in the center of the head, right where that pineal gland lies. We will talk much more extensively about the pineal gland in a minute, but it is essentially this gland in the middle of your brain that is really that connection point from the physical to the metaphysical in this third eye space. But we see the third eye here as coming out between the eyebrows in the center of the forehead, and its role is the center of your intuition, your inner wisdom, your ability to perceive not only the physical reality, but also the spiritual reality. It's also what is in control of any psychic abilities. And I know that word scares some of you. Psychic just means that extrasensory perception. There is nothing wrong, nothing evil with the word psychic. It just is that extra level of perception, and we all have these abilities to some degree or another. Some people are just more shut down in this area, and some people are more activated. That's it. That's all. Now, I don't necessarily believe that everyone is meant to be a seer or a prophet or a psychic speaker for other people's lives and for other people's journey, in the same way that even maybe I am, or some other people that are on this path to help others along in their journey. But I do believe that we all have access to these different abilities for our own lives. It is natural. It is part of our genetic makeup and system as humans, as spiritual beings having a human experience. But the problem is that many people have shut down this area, whether intentionally because it was scary and you didn't know what to do with it, or whether unintentionally because at some point someone in your generational line was told that it was unsafe, that it was dangerous, or that it wasn't even useful, and that we needed to live in this logic, three-dimensional way of thinking and conceptualizing and analyzing rather than living from that intuitive space. So I want to encourage you in that all of you can activate this. All of you can experience this. Even coming from a Christian background, I worked for a guy he was a pastor, and he had an extrasensory perception, another knowing, another ability to really tap in and to get downloads and guidance from that God source energy. And in working for him, it was a really interesting experience because he did a lot of conferences and went to a lot of events where he would basically do readings for people and give prophetic words and give that insight that he was downloading from God, from source energy. And in working for him, I came to realize how incredibly reliant humans are on a person that is able to tap in that way. There are so many of you out there that don't want to trust your own self and your own intuition, and maybe you don't believe that you can tap in, that you can feel connected to God in that way, that you can feel like you have clarity and answers and that inner knowing inside of you. But the truth is, we all have that ability. And it's sad to me, and it was sad then to watch all of these people just be in utter turmoil internally and horrible circumstances within their lives and within their communities where they felt that they were a victim to their circumstances and their experiences, and that they needed someone like this pastor who was really tapped in to help them, to get them out of it. And it just breaks my heart that not only does that happen, but also people profit off of that. And so I want to say to you, if you ever come to work with me, if you ever want to unblock yourself energetically and start to activate that inner knowing and that inner guidance, I will help you to do that. I won't just tell you your future. I won't just tell you what's wrong with you. I won't just tell you what I think God is saying for you or what the universe wants you to know. I will tell you how to do that for yourself. I will show you how to do that for yourself. You are capable of doing that, and we'll work on your ability to really tap in and connect in that way, because it is your right as a human being, as a spiritual being, to have that connection and to be able to do that. You are not a victim, and you don't have to wait for someone like me or anyone else to make that connection for you. And this goes way back. I mean, if you think about the Catholic Church and the history of the Catholic Church, that is the whole concept of confession, going to someone else who has that direct line to God. But we don't need to do that. We don't need to have someone in between as our liaison to God. We are able to just access that within ourselves. So I'm going to get off my soapbox about that now, but I say that because I want you to know, like, you have so much power, so much more than you are probably currently walking in or think that you do. And yeah, you might not experience or be able to tap in right now the way that you see other people do it, but it is available to you. And the more you really lean into it, and the more that you actually seek that for yourself rather than trusting everyone else outside of yourself, the more it will really come online for you. Okay, so this third eye energy center, the color is indigo. The element is light. I know we've talked about all of these energy centers having different elements, and this one is light. It is connected to the eyes. So, right, our eyes take in light, and our brain perceives those different light waves as a picture. The same is true with our pineal gland, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But the pineal gland actually has rods and cones just like your eye. So it is able to perceive light, but it's not light that's visible to the human eye. Remember, I said everything is energy. Everything is really light and sound. All of that is just energy, frequency, waves. So on the spectrum of light, there is a portion of it that is visible to the human eye. And then there's a portion of it, most of it, is not. But it's still sending signals. It's still information. And our pineal gland in the center of our head has the ability to read that information, those waves, those particles, and perceive it. And so we just have to trust that and start to learn how to interpret the information that we're getting from that invisible light. And this really brings us back to this idea that our energy body is really a light body. It's a body of frequency. Everything at its core is really just light. Even source energy, even God, is just this beautiful, brilliant frequency. And so our ability to perceive that is just tapping into that frequency and connecting with it. And so that's what we can do here in this pineal gland. And there's, of course, much more science behind that. And some of it has not even fully been uncovered yet. Because as I've mentioned before, science and spirituality really have been pretty separate for many, many years. And so now, as we are starting to make scientific discoveries that really make it undeniable, some of these facts about how we are all so connected and how our body is so connected to our mind and our spirit, we're getting to the point scientifically where it's irrefutable. We have to acknowledge it. And so a lot of old theories are starting to be debunked and break down in favor of some of these new discoveries that we just cannot ignore any longer. So this pineal gland in the center of your head, it is like an antenna, and it is tuned to perceive that light at an energetic level, which is the thing that is helping us to tap in to that intuition, to that spiritual awareness. The third eye is in charge of seeing beyond the physical. So that's accessing that insight, accessing that inner knowing, those downloads, that clarity about your life. This is why when you're really tapped in here, you just know things and you almost don't know how you know them. Sometimes I know things and then I go and look it up and it's true. And that is because I am picking up information from the world around me all the time, and I'm able to interpret that. Interpreting it is just the skill that needs to be learned here a lot of times. This energy center is also very connected to imagination. When babies are born, they are very active in this state. Our pineal gland can also become calcified over time because of different substances, and there can just be a lot of interference with physical elements of our world. So when a baby first comes into the world, they are so active here, and their pineal gland is not calcified in any way. It's completely open and available and able to connect with the frequencies that are moving in and through their world. This is why sometimes little kids will be able to see ghosts or spirits, or sometimes they'll be able to see auras, or they'll be able to remember things before they were born, remember where they came from. Sometimes they will have just a deeper insight and knowing about what's going on with people around them. This is because their pineal gland is picking up that information and they have not yet decided to shut it down, whether that is with physical substances or whether it is just intentionally shutting it down. Now, a lot of kids are told to stop playing with imaginary friends, to stop talking about ghosts or spirits and monsters aren't real and all of that kind of stuff. And that begins to socially kind of shut this part of them down. They begin to stop trusting this part of themselves and think that it's all made up or it's fake. Because logically, coming from that adult perspective, many adults are not tapped in here. Now, when we talk about imagination, this is also the space that you are able to visualize your future and visualize the things you want in your life. And that's part of why visualization is so powerful, because it actually activates and opens up this pineal gland. It opens up this energy center. Just like having that childlike wonder, just like you did when you were a kid. When you were a kid, you could imagine your life to be anything you wanted it to be, especially if you were in a safe and playful environment as a kid. And so this is just opening that childlikeness, that wonder back up. It's allowing yourself to explore, what if there is more than this three-dimensional reality that I see and I interact with every single day? What if there is another layer to it? What if there's more? And when we're able to do that, because of the nature of our reality, because there is more, because of our ability to work with frequency and energy, when we actually allow our body to expand in that way and our imagination to open up, we do attract things into our lives. We do start to experience the things that we visualize. And we do that anyway when we visualize negative things happening, when we worry over and over and we picture horrible things happening to us, we are also activating that imagination. So this imagination really connects us to that higher creativity. And when we can tap in here and allow that higher guidance to be infused with this imagination, then beautiful creative things start to be born. This is where we conceptualize and have ideas about the things we want to create and produce into the world. If you haven't listened to my podcast episode on intuition, that one also will really give you some insight into the difference between an intuition here in the mind versus the heart versus the solar plexus. They all kind of have different functions, and here is where we conceptualize our actions. We don't take action in the mind. We don't feel it in the mind. We conceptualize it. And it's a very important part of the intuitive process. Sometimes it gets a bad rap because we want to move from that lower intuitive space, but this is a really important part of the process. So definitely check that episode out as well if you are interested in really developing this inner knowing and ability to move forward from your intuitive space. Now let's talk a little bit about some of these psychic abilities, some of these intuitive abilities. Again, I don't want the word psychic to scare anybody, and I think people have a perceived notion of what psychics are and what they do. It's not just telling the future, and it's not just taking people's money and faking you out. I think that a lot of people have maybe experienced that. But really what psychic activity is and what psychics do is, again, what we're all able to do if we are activated and open here. And it is that you are able to look at the energy. And again, I'm talking about with the third eye. I'm not talking about with your eyeballs. I'm talking about you're able to read this energy. You're able to look at the energy, to perceive what it is saying, and to translate that and interpret it for the person that you are reading or whose energy you are looking at. There are CIA documents that talk about these abilities. They talk about remote viewing, which is where you are able to almost travel with your consciousness to another location and perceive the energy of that location. And when you do that, sometimes you're able to see what's going on in the physical realm, and you're also able to see what's going on in the higher dimensions, in the spiritual realm. Another ability here is intuitive perception. It's that ability to know what someone is feeling, what someone is thinking. I mean, there are many, many different psychic abilities that we could talk about and emphasize here. But the most important thing I want you to know is that these abilities have been studied for years and years, and they are way more common than you realize. In fact, you are reading energy and you are utilizing some of these psychic abilities more than you probably know on a daily basis. Especially if you're a really empathetic person. When you walk into a room, you may feel the energy. Now, if you were taught how to perceive it and translate it, you would be doing this. Sometimes when you're talking to a friend and they need advice, and there's just a feeling that comes over you, maybe you're a really good counselor or you're a really good therapist, and you don't quite know where that information comes from or where that advice comes from. That is you tapping in. That's you tapping into this intuitive space and working with the energy. You just don't realize that you're doing it. So let's talk about the different senses that may become activated when this third eye is balanced. So you can see here what you kind of have going on already. Most of us have one or two that is a little bit stronger just naturally, and we're more inclined to that type of perception. And some others we may need to work on or practice a little bit. So I'm just going to go through them, and you can determine for yourself if you have any of these that are already active, or maybe all of them are shut down, and you can start to decide and determine what would be the place that you want to focus on to kind of begin to activate this. The first one is one of the most popular. It is clairvoyance, and this is seeing things clearly. So this is when you see visions, you see auras, you see spirits, and you also see intuitive images. So let's kind of get into all of that. So seeing visions kind of always makes me think of That's So Raven. I don't know if you watched that show as a kid, but it's that ability to almost kind of see what could happen in the future. And I want to point out too, this really gets into like a lot of crazy stuff that we don't really have time for today, but seeing the future doesn't necessarily mean you are seeing exactly what will happen. If you see a vision of something, you are seeing a potential possibility of where the current energy will go if nothing is changed. So sometimes people will go see a psychic and they may be really fearful afterward because a psychic saw something horrible in their future and told them about it. I mean, number one, I don't think that's a very good psychic, because if they were legitimate or had any kind of training, they would know that there is always the ability for you to change your own energy. So that's kind of where like this fate and free will comes in. Free will gives us the ability to work with and change our own energy. But a lot of times when we see a vision about something, or when we see some kind of future experience or someone sees that for us, it is the experience of where we will go if we do not change something about ourselves or our energy. So that would be seeing visions, seeing the future, really getting a picture in your mind, or some people actually see it as almost a superimposed image on the real world. This is the same thing with like spirits and ghosts and auras. Some people see this, and this really is kind of more of the clairvoyance that I think of. Some people see this like it is on top of their reality. So these might be the people who wake up in the night and they see someone in their room. They see a spirit in their room, or they are able to look at a person and read their aura because their aura is emitting this light that they can perceive at a visual level. Some clairvoyance, and this is more of what I experience, is intuitive images. So rather than seeing it superimposed on your physical reality, you almost see it in your mind's eye. And this is that place of imagination. This is that place where you could close your eyes and you could imagine a scene. This is more how I see and how a lot of people I know see. So when we're talking about, oh, I see this spirit or I see this image or whatever it is, a lot of times what we're talking about is seeing it mentally, not in the physical world. And I think people get discouraged by that and confused by that, where they're not seeing it in their physical reality. And so they're like, well, I'm not clairvoyant. But that's not true at all. It's just a different type of clairvoyance. The next one is something called clairaudience, and this is clear hearing. So this is when you hear voices, you hear sounds, you hear messages, you might hear God speaking to you, you might hear like angels or spirit guides. This is hearing guidance with your ears. Now again, sometimes this is literally audible to the person. Like they will feel like someone is speaking to them in the room. And then sometimes it's not, but it's hard to exactly describe what that feels like. It's almost like a whisper of someone speaking to you, but you know that you didn't hear something audibly, but you still heard a word or a phrase very clearly. So clairaudience to me also kind of goes hand in hand with something called claircognizance. And claircognizance is like this clear knowing, this ability to know something instinctively. Maybe you don't have a logical explanation for it, or you didn't know something and then suddenly you do. That's where this claircognizance kind of comes in. So sometimes I think clairaudience kind of works like that or with that, where you kind of hear something and you think like, oh my gosh, did God just like speak to me? And then you just know it. You just know it internally. Yes, this is the answer, or this is what I need to do, or this is where I need to go. I just know something, whatever it is. And this is what I'm talking about, where sometimes I'll just know things and then I'll go research it and it's actually true and accurate. Now, a lot of people who are in their mental processes but not their intuitive processes have a really, really hard time with this. This would be someone who their third eye is very closed, but their mental processes are functioning like hyper-functioning, over-functioning. And when this happens, sometimes they have trouble to even comprehend the idea of knowing something without researching it or without seeing it directly with your eyes in the physical. And I totally understand that. I mean, if you've never had this experience, then how would you know? It sounds crazy. I get it. So if that is you, just know that it is weird. It is weird and different in our society because so many people are not operating in their clairvoyance, their clairsentience, all of these things, but it is possible. And the more you start to believe that maybe it might be possible for you, the more your energy will start to trust that and begin to open up to it. The next one is clairsentience, and clairsentience is clear feeling. This is probably my number one clair. This is where I am able to feel the energies, feel emotions, feel physical sensations that give me information. So for instance, when I am working with a client, if this client has some anxiety, I might feel anxiety the same way they do in my own body. Or I might feel my stomach start to really hurt. In that instance, I would know, like I might get a really bad stomach ache while I'm working on the client. And by that, I would know that they either have anxiety trapped in that area in their stomach, or they have physical problems going on in their digestive system. And typically it's both. Typically it goes hand in hand. Another example is, for instance, once I do house clearings, which is basically where I just go through the energy of the home and make sure that there's no unwanted energy in there, that everything that's in the space is of the family that lives there, and that they haven't picked anything up from either visitors passing through or from people who were previous owners or from objects that are in their home, whatever. So one time I was doing one of these and I was kind of led out to the backyard, and that there was a space in the backyard that really needed to be cleared, that needed to be energetically purged. So I'm doing this all from a distance, okay? So I clear out this space, and as I'm doing this, I get a massive headache. Like, it is like something is crushing my head while I'm clearing this. And I'm like, whoa, this is so intense and so weird. So this is all happening, and I talk to the homeowner the next day and I say, okay, here's what happened. This is what I did. And this is kind of how I do these clearings for people, is I'll do the clearing and then I'll kind of give them a report on what I found and what happened. And I said, the energy really led me out to the backyard, and there was this one spot sort of by the shed, and it was really, really intense for a little bit. And it felt as though there was a really strong energy there that needed to be moved out. And she said to me, oh my goodness, there's a tombstone out there, but we don't think that there's a body there. We just think that someone put this tombstone here as a memorial or something for this person. So I was like, wow, that's so crazy. Well, it definitely felt like I was moving like a soul. Like, it wasn't just some weird stagnant energy. Like, there was definitely something going on here. And I said, and it's something with the head. Like, it was really intense in the head. She's like, huh, that's so interesting. So a little bit later, they had someone come and remove the tombstone, and they had a historian look into whose tombstone this was and why it was there. And what they ended up finding was that the person who had died was a young kid who was in a really bad accident. And there was a newspaper article about it. And the newspaper article talked about horrible, intense injuries to the head that ultimately caused the death. So this is an example of clairsentience. I was feeling that pressure and that pain that soul felt during their death experience. And that's the energy that was in the space. And so I was able to move that out and move it through and ultimately help that soul. So we have clairvoyance, clairaudience, claircognizance, clairsentience, and then clairalience. And clairalience is the ability to smell. So clear smelling scents that aren't physically present, but carry a spiritual or intuitive significance. So sometimes this will be smelling something that feels nostalgic, brings you into the past. Sometimes it will be smelling maybe the cologne of a past loved one. Or when I was in the Christian church, people used to talk about the fragrance of God and the fragrance of angels. So that is a real thing. Sometimes you will almost smell like a really sweet smell, and that is the presence of a being there with you. This can also go the other way. Sometimes you can smell things that are horrible and really awful, and that can be a warning or a sense that it's not a safe place to be. Okay, and then the last one here is clairgustance, which is clear tasting. Now, clairalience and clairgustance are not talked about as often as some of the other clairs, and I think it's just because, it's kind of maybe something that doesn't seem as that impactful or that interesting, but regardless, it still can provide information for you, especially if you are someone who is very tapped into these particular senses in your body, your smell, sense of smell, and your sense of taste. So this is tasting something without a physical source. Again, very similar to smelling. It's linked to memories. It's linked to spiritual experiences, maybe nostalgic experiences. And again, maybe tasting something that reminds you of a certain person or a certain experience. Then we have clairtangency, which is a sense of touch, a clear sense of touch. And this is being able to detect information through your hands. So sometimes people with this ability will be able to hold and touch something that is from a relative who passed away and be able to sense energy about that person, or even like a historic building or something like that, to be in the space. They would be able to feel the kind of events that went on there. Or maybe they go to a thrift store and they pick something up. They would be able to feel the energy of the person who owned that previously, that kind of thing. Now, there's also a clairempathy, which to me is very similar to clairsentience. It is just that ability to feel emotions on a deeper level and to really know what's going on emotionally with a person. To me, I just kind of lump it into clairsentience, but it can be an even deeper sense here. Sometimes people have clairempathy, but they do not have clairsentience where they feel physical sensations. They just feel emotional sensations. So that's part of that too. Goodness, I could talk forever and ever about this stuff, and maybe at some point we could just talk about, psychic abilities. So those are some of the things you might experience if you're totally online here. Or if you're partially online and you are experiencing those in any way, maybe some of those things you have experienced, but you didn't realize that that was actually an extrasensory perception or a psychic ability. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the emotional and mental processes in this part of the energy body. So in the third eye space is really where we can determine whether your energy is in the future, you're worrying a lot about the future, whether it is in the past, you are regretting the past, or if you are fully present. And most people are not. People generally tend to have their energy split between the past and the future and very little energy in the present, in the potential moment, which is so fascinating because the only thing that exists is the present moment. The past is done and it's just energy and memories, and the future has yet to be birthed, has yet to be experienced. And so we spend a lot of our time mentally in either of these places, but really the only place that change can happen and the only place we even experience life is right here in the present. So if your energy is too much in the future or too much in the past, you are not experiencing everything you can out of life. You are not able to properly function in this reality, and you're not able to process the things going on in your life, the emotions, the experiences, and the events happening to you every single day. So being balanced in this space really has a lot to do with being able to be present, rather than being anxious and worried about the future, or even constantly just waiting for the next thing, or being stuck in the past, unable to move on from different choices or experience that were had. Overthinking a lot of times has to do with the past or the future. Rarely are you overthinking about anything in the present. And overthinking is really what jams up this intuitive signal more than anything else. It leads to mental exhaustion. It's almost like having your phone screen on all the time and all of your apps open at once. I mean, that is going to drain your battery like crazy. So with this space, this mental space, this third eye space, we really want to make sure that all of the apps that don't need to be running aren't running, that they're closed down, shut down, so that the things that you're working on and the things that you're processing in the present moment, you're able to process. If you think about that with your phone, not only does it drain the battery, but it makes the apps run much slower because there isn't energy to process all of the functions that the app needs to process. The same is true with your brain. If you've got too much running, too much going on, you've got brain fog, you've got trouble finding clarity, maybe trouble finding your words, maybe you can't remember things very well. I mean, there's a lot here that interrupts your ability to process both mentally and intuitively here. So in terms of physical aspects of this energy center, if you have imbalances here, you are going to have physical problems as well, like headaches, a lot of headaches probably, eye strain, dizziness, or a lot of sinus issues, maybe even neurological problems, and sleep disorders. Now, this has to do with the pineal gland, which your pineal gland is in charge of your circadian rhythm. So this is your wake-sleep cycle. If you have too much hormonal imbalance here because you're too stressed, you're thinking about the future a lot, that is contributing to your insomnia or your fatigue as well. Not only is your energy thrown off here, but your wake-sleep cycle, maybe you stay up really late, maybe you wake up really late, it's not functioning properly with the external source of energy, which is the sun. We should be generally waking and sleeping on the same schedule as the sunrise and the sunset. And a lot of us are spending a lot of time on our phones or watching TV, and all of that light in our eyeballs is altering our circadian rhythm so that we are unable to function in the same flow of nature and the universe. The third eye energy center is also very connected to the solar plexus energy center. And remember last week we talked about how the throat is very connected to the sacral energy, and it's almost like a mirror. It's almost like a higher level mirror of the lower level energy. The same is true with the third eye and the mental process here. So you've heard, I'm sure, about the gut-brain connection, and this is more of a physical connection where the gut and brain are connected through a network of neurons and chemicals and hormones that are sending messages to one another. So the gut is sometimes called the second brain because it impacts our mood, it impacts our clarity, our overall well-being, and all of that physically is connected with the vagus nerve. This is a big nerve that runs all the way down the body. And so this connection here allows the health of your gut due to your diet, your stress, everything going on there to contribute to your mental processes. So your feelings of anxiety, your brain fog, your depression, any kind of cognitive function. All of that has to do with that physical connection. Now, emotionally, if you remember, we talked about how the solar plexus is that gut feeling, that seat of intuition, that ability to take action in the physical. And so when this space is healthy, you're able to have that intuitive insight, process it in the mind, in this mental space, and then take action with it in that lower space in the body. A lot of times, if you are feeling disconnected intuitively, it's important to realize, is that coming from this lower solar plexus space, or is that disconnection coming from this third eye space? It's a very different feeling. It's the difference between feeling it in your body and knowing it in your mind. Sometimes, if one is imbalanced, the other is also imbalanced. So if you are having physical problems like depression or anxiety or brain fog or any of that, of course, you should be looking at the gut. And the same is true with mental processes. If you're having trouble with mental processes, you should be looking at the gut. And a lot of people are really, really disconnected between that lower body and that upper body, that more carnal space and that higher conscious, more spiritual space. And again, remember, we talked about with the heart, this is where they meet. So also, if the heart is blocked, we have trouble getting these messages through. Which again is why I say, if you haven't listened to those other podcast episodes first, go listen to those as well, along with this one. because it'll really provide a full picture of how this energy is meant to flow through the body. Okay, so now let's talk about the difference between an open and a closed third eye. The reason people have called it for centuries the third eye is because physically it is taking in that energetic information, and metaphysically it is allowing for this insight. So if it's open, you are going to experience insight and mental processes that are beyond the logical mind. It's going to allow you access to deeper intuitive knowing. And this is something, again, that is so difficult to describe until you experience it. So it's why a lot of people who have a closed third eye think that all of this is batshit crazy. Because unless you've experienced it, unless your third eye is open, it's almost impossible to experience it. And until you experience it, you can't really know what it is. Another thing that happens when your third eye is open is you have a present moment awareness. You become more attuned to the present moment rather than thinking about the future, thinking about the past. And this really brings you into that ability to kind of look at the world for what is really going on, like what is really happening. When we're present, we are able to perceive in a way that we are not able to otherwise because we're so wrapped up in this energy that doesn't even really exist in the present moment. So this also allows you space for new perspectives, to understand other people's perspectives, and a space to download fresh ideas and fresh perspectives. If you're constantly planning and problem solving your future before it's even happened, this doesn't allow space for any organic growth or movement. You're living fully in expectation of what you know, and what you know is information from your past. If you're living in the present, then you're open to new possibilities and available to being surprised and thrilled beyond your wildest dreams and expectations because you have none. You may have the expectation that you'll be thrilled and surprised, but beyond that, you're open and available to whatever life and the universe brings to you. And that is a magical way to live. And if you have an open third eye, you are often living in this state, more so than other people. If you have an open third eye, you are also living in a whole brain state. Now, this is both a physical state and a rather spiritual state. But physically, what happens when you go into a whole brain state is that this changes the frequency of your brain waves. And when you do this, you're basically bringing on both hemispheres of your brain, the right side and the left side of your brain. Now, you can do this physically. There are different postures you can get in that bring you into a whole brain state. In fact, many yoga poses actually bring you into this whole brain state, which is why sometimes yoga can be so transformative for people. Because when you're in this whole brain state, what it does is it opens up your subconscious mind. It allows space, almost like a little door, opening up into the subconscious. It allows space for information to slip into the subconscious and intention to slip into the subconscious, which is where change happens. If you're constantly just functioning by the left side or the right side of the brain all the time, then you are running on programs that already exist in the subconscious. But if you're able to bring your body into a whole brain state, you are able to shift your perspectives. You're able to shift your subconscious programming. And so much of what we do is really just programming. And so by having an open third eye here, you are able to alter your programming. This is why meditation is one of the most powerful practices, because meditation brings your brain into that whole brain state where both sides are activated, and it lowers the frequency of your brain waves, which allows for access to that subconscious. Now, the left side of the brain is that logical side. It is the more masculine side of the mind. So this is the side that is in charge of moving you forward, in charge of planning, and in charge of more analytical processes and problem solving. And this left side of the brain is also what controls the right side of the body. And this is why the right side of the body is more of that masculine energy, that forward-moving energy, that structured energy. The right side of the brain is the more creative side of the brain, and this is connected to the left side of the body. It's why if you have a stroke on the right side of your brain, the left side of your body will be paralyzed. So this is also physical as well as energetic. The right side of the brain is that more feminine, energetic quality. So this is the ability to go with the flow. This is the ability to really tap into that intuition, to have a more organic experience, a more nurturing and emotional experience, and also to bring that forward into the world. So if you have blockages or pain on the left or the right side of your body, sometimes this can indicate to you where you might have blockages even in the brain energetically. And if you find yourself really functioning in that masculine energy or that feminine energy, again, we want to bring it into balance. We want to be in that whole brain state. So for you, meditating will be a great way to get into this space as well. When your third eye is open, you are also in connection with the earth and kind of the oneness of everything. You are in a state that's more in tune with nature, more in tune with the rhythms of the earth. And our pineal gland actually acts like both a metronome and like a GPS. We have a natural GPS. So the metronome part of it entrains our energy with the energy of what's around us in our environment, in nature, the cycles of the planet and of the sun and the moon, but also the environment that we live in. So this is why it's so important to adjust your environment if you're having trouble mentally, because this pineal gland is picking up the frequency of everything going on around you at all times, whether you know it or not. Additionally, this pineal gland is a navigational system. Almost every, if not every single animal on Earth has this internal navigation system. It's why birds fly south in the winter. They're not just like, oh, I'm cold. They know where to go and they know when to go because they have this internal navigation system. And all that is reading the energy. They're not sitting there conceptualizing and thinking about how they're cold and they're going to fly south and getting directions from their GPS. Internally, instinctually, they are just moving with the waves of energy. There have been studies that even dogs will poop in line with the Earth's energetic grid. It's why they kind of like prance around a little looking for the perfect spot. Now, part of that is marking their territory, and then part of that is actually being energetically aligned with the planet. And we are wired the same way. But the crazy thing is, for years and years, everybody was convinced that we weren't. And then in 2019, that is not that long ago, they discovered that when the energy around us changes, our brain waves change and adapt to that. So we are also able to navigate internally based on the energy of the planet. And most of us have just totally shut this down and turned this off. So if your third eye is open, you have a better chance of living and functioning in that. So if you're getting lost all the time or you have a terrible sense of direction, there may be some imbalance here in this place in your body. And this pineal gland operates at around 40 hertz. That's the frequency of this gland. And this frequency is associated with intuition, that clairvoyance, love, gratitude, and childlike wonder. It's that same frequency. So when we turn this on, we have a little bit more of that innocence, that purity, that childlikeness. And so a lot of times someone whose third eye is very open might seem childlike to you, might seem pure-hearted, might seem a little innocent or naive. And they're not. They have a lot of wisdom. They have a lot of internal depth. But you are unable to see that because you are so rigid and structured in that closed space up there. And then the last thing of having an open third eye here is that harmony, that feeling of being fully online, fully tapped in. When your third eye is fully active, you feel in harmony with yourself and with the world. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't mean you don't see all of the horrible things going on in the world, but that is not the main quality of your everyday life. You can recognize it and maybe even have some wisdom of what to do with all of it, rather than just seeing all of it and carrying it and feeling heavy by it. When your third eye is not open, it is like missing a vital sense. It is like missing sight or touch or smell or sound. But so many of us have lived without it for so long that we don't even realize that that's how it's affecting us. So if your third eye is closed, you will feel a lack of intuition. You will feel disconnected from not only your gut feelings, but that inner knowing. A lot of times you'll second guess yourself. You might really have trouble making a decision, or you're always asking for that external validation, that validation from your family, your friends, rather than trusting your inner knowing. You may have foggy vision, like struggle to visualize your future, your dreams, struggle to visualize your purpose. You may feel really unclear or just feel lost in general. And like I said, this also plays out physically. If you feel like you have no sense of direction or you get lost a lot, this is part of that third eye being closed. You're going to feel also disconnected from those psychic abilities, that reduced access to intuitive abilities, to those senses, all of those tapping into that deeper awareness, all of those clairs I was talking about earlier. You may even just totally feel cut off from any type of higher guidance. And a lot of people who have this problem, their mind is almost like a cage. Like it is like a lockbox. It is totally shut down here, where the mental processes are just running, the programs that you were programmed with are just going and running. And then a lot of times overthinking is really the key element here for people whose third eyes are closed. You will also possibly have a very narrow perspective, like a limited ability to see beyond this immediate material world, to recognize anybody else's opinions or their perceptions of the world, of their life, of events. This is the opposite of open-minded. And open-minded isn't just the ability to accept really outrageous experiences and shocking things. No, it is the ability to look at other people's beliefs, opinions, and experiences and perceptions and really consider them without getting defensive, without getting fearful, without judgment or criticism, and really trying to understand and empathize with their experience and their beliefs. So if you find yourself getting really critical, if you find yourself unable to just look at someone else's beliefs without it threatening your personal life and personal reality, then you probably have a closed third eye. And then, of course, if you're overthinking, you've got that static, really disconnecting you from that higher sense. Now, on a physical level, some overactive symptoms would be overwhelmed, difficulty staying grounded. Like you might be a person who's overwhelmed with psychic visions. This means it's too open and you're too vulnerable. You may have terrifying dreams, or you might see spirits and ghosts all the time, and they are really disrupting your life. This is almost when it's broken open too much. And here we have to talk about your spiritual authority, because you are the authority of your energy and you are in charge here. But with different trauma and a lot of difficult experiences, sometimes our energy gets almost ripped open or broken open, and other energies and other entities have access to our energy. And a lot of times they will torture through the third eye. They will just bother you all the time. And to the extreme of this is when you are constantly hearing voices or you're having a sort of spiritual psychosis here. Spiritual psychosis is very real, and it's when you open up this space too quickly. So sometimes people who have taken ayahuasca or done some sort of medicine ceremony, they've ripped open this space when they weren't ready for it. And this will allow some of those other energies to penetrate your space. So that happens a lot of times. Sometimes it happens during trauma or some kind of abuse. This space is ripped open, and then continually you may be searching for connection, you may be searching for love, you may be searching outside of yourself, and so it gets ripped open again and again and again, and all of this other energy is able to pour into your space and really, really affect you on a negative level. So you may have even suicidal thoughts here, you may have some really deep, dark experiences by this being overactive and just really too open. In the next couple of months, I'm going to be putting out some tools and materials for those of you that have maybe experienced some of this for self-protection in your energy. And I will probably do a whole podcast episode on it as well in the next couple of months. So stay tuned for that. But if this is you, if you're having night terrors, if you're hearing voices, if you feel like there is other energy in your space that is not your own, if you are seeing ghosts and spirits and entities and you are having a lot of trouble here, I actually specialize in this type of work and type of release. So please reach out to me and I can help you get free from that and really protect your energy space. I also want to mention too, because I forgot, this includes hallucinations and it includes paranoia. Okay? You also may find yourself living here in a fantasy world or excessive daydreaming, or you're over-reliant on your intuition without any type of logic. This happens to a lot of spiritual individuals who open up their third eye, again, too much, too quick, too soon. And it's almost like they're not even in this reality anymore. They are totally lost and gone and living in a delusional reality. Again, I want to stress the importance of being grounded in this three-dimensional physical reality. There is a reason we're here. There's a reason we're in these bodies. It is not to escape. It is not to ascend out of our body and leave and float up into heaven. That is not why we're here. So it's really important as you are balancing this area to also be balancing those lower energy centers. All right, so if your third eye is underactive, then you're going to have that lack of clarity, that disconnection from your intuition, lack of focus, narrow-mindedness, a difficulty visualizing. Maybe you don't have any dreams or you have difficulty dreaming, both in your daily life, daydreaming, but also at night. Maybe you don't have a dream life whatsoever. You also may feel a lack of purpose, blocked creativity. You might feel lost or disconnected from the bigger picture of your life, and also an inability to see beyond the surface level of things. So let's talk about balancing the third eye then here. Meditation is going to be number one for this. And a lot of people want to jump to like mystical experiences. They want to have these big emotional experiences. They want to get free and they want to heal, but they would rather go do a medicine ceremony and have some shaman lead them through an entire spiritual purge and opening and clearing, rather than sit down every single day and be disciplined about the experience and your spiritual opening and awakening. I don't necessarily think it's wrong to go have a big spiritual experience like that. And I think sometimes it's necessary and we need that kind of activation. But at the same time, if you want to change your life, it is on you. And to do it in a safe way, in a way that isn't going to break you, it's really important to have some of these daily practices like meditation, where you're working through this space. You are activating this third eye intentionally. You are visualizing. You are maybe even journaling about it, really sitting with yourself in that present moment. Sometimes those big experiences are still escapism. But being with yourself every single day in your current reality, wherever that is, whatever you're doing, whatever your life circumstances are, and being able to work with this space in that reality is going to get you much, much further than constantly escaping to all of these big experiences. So really practicing presence and practicing meditation here is going to be number one. Practicing that childlikeness, practicing daydreaming, practicing expanding is also part of this, really enjoying your life. Now, just quickly, for those of you who are creatives, I do want to say this is the place where you're able to access and download all of those new ideas that are different from everybody else. If you want to be unique, if you want to be magnetic, this is the place to work with. When you see an artist who is doing something totally new that no one's ever done, and you just can't help but watch and interact with their art, it is because this space is open and active, and they are communing with that divine energy to bring forth those creations, whether they realize it or not. So opening up this space is going to help you see all of those fresh perspectives and really move through some of those creative blocks and tune in. It's also really going to inform your own voice. That voice we talked about last week, it's going to inform that and help you to trust that on a deep level, because when you know it deeply, you know that it's your truth. It's so much easier to express the truth, and that is that artistic expression. And then when you know why you're here, when you find your purpose, when you know what your message is, what you're here to speak to the world, your creation becomes so much more powerful. And I'm not saying all art and creation has to have some big message or meaning behind it, but the ones that really impact the world for the greater good and for humanity to ascend and to expand, those are coming from a really spiritual, deep place. Those are the things that change the world. Those are the messages that change the world. So if you want that, this is the place to work through, to open up. So think about for yourself where you are on this journey. Do you feel like you have an open, expanded third eye, or does it feel closed off and disconnected? Are you able to really tap in and get answers to any question you have? Or at least have some guidance? Or do you feel totally closed off and shut down from that? And like maybe you need to get outside validation. When was the last time you felt that strong, intuitive guidance? And did you follow it, or did you overthink and go back and forth? Are you able to visualize your goals, your dreams, or do you struggle with that clarity about what you want and where you're headed? And are you able to rely on your inner wisdom, or does everything have to be logical and external advice or researched? Again, I am not saying to throw all of that out, but are you able to sit in the middle of both? Again, if you are in any state of this process that feels difficult for you, I will help you learn to unblock this and open up this space in a really safe and efficient way. So if that is you, please schedule a one-on-one consultation with me and we can talk about your process. Many of my clients are coming to me for this very reason. If you have entity attachments, hear voices, if you have a third eye that is broken open, please reach out to me and we will help you get that under control. and back to a healthy, safe, productive, and free place for you. If you'd rather have a toolbox of meditations and new tools every single week, join my membership on my Substack for $7.77 a month, and you get something fresh in your inbox every single week that you can use to work on your own healing and your own spiritual awakening. Next week, we are going to talk all about the crown chakra and that connection with the divine. Thank you again so much for being here and for letting me help you and guide you on your journey. I love you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you next week.